Hello, everybody. Welcome to the We Have Issues podcast. I'm Carvel.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Chris.
And today we're going to talk about the recent events in the mobilization of troops for ISIS operations inside of Portland and in other cities. So just to give you guys a basic context, Donald Trump recently on Saturday mentioned that he was going to mobilize troops to Portland, Oregon. And right now, the Portland, Oregon is just trying to figure out what they're going to do next. And Chris, do you have any thoughts or opinions on that?
I got a lot of opinions on this, Carvel. Okay. I don't like it. I don't like sending federal troops to U.S. cities, U.S. states that have nothing wrong going on with them. Ostensibly, Trump said that he was sending these troops to cities like Memphis, D.C., Chicago, Portland, L.A. because of a rise in crime. People might not know this, but crime has been at all-time lows since the heights of 1991, when violent crime peaked. And over the last 30 years, crime has been steadily decreasing. It's gotten a little bit of a bump in the last couple of years. I think we can see reasons why that might be, but things aren't as bad in these cities as he's making it out to be. This is not a national emergency type situation. Big cities have always had issues with crime, considering urban poverty and all those sorts of things. And there's no reason that we need federal troops marching through our cities enforcing order. And in fact, doing such a thing is unconstitutional. It's a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, which states that federal troops can only be used in cases such as an insurrection, which is not happening contrary to popular belief. A couple of crazed people, doing mass shootings does not constitute an insurrection. There's no organization behind it.
How would that change now that he's designated like Antifa as a terrorist organization?
You have to prove there is an organization known as Antifa that is actively coordinating and committing acts of terrorism in these cities. And even so, that's still a bit of a stretch because that is not one of the powers granted to the federal government under the Constitution.
Yep. Okay. All right.
That is the purveyance of the states. Now, the governor of the state can utilize the National Guard if they believe, because they control their states. We are a federal system, not a unitary system. If the governor of Oregon believes that he needs the National Guard to come in to establish order in Portland, that's pretty much up to him. However, you still got your First Amendment rights, right to assembly, right to peaceful protest, right to speech. You still have your Fourth Amendment rights, where no unreasonable searches and seizures. So you can't be doing this. And those rights still apply to people who aren't even citizens. So even if it's being done to support ICE in, collecting detainees for immigration issues, you still can't violate the Constitution. You can't violate the rule of law just because you think you are the law, which is what Trump is kind of doing now, in my opinion.
Question for you, Chris. So I've noticed that most of these cities that Trump is mobilizing troops to go in, they seem to be cities that are from blue states. Do you think that there's anything that's going on with Trump as far as a payback, or do you think it's just these cities are having issues.
I absolutely think that this is targeted towards Democrat-run cities. You say states, but Tennessee's obviously not a democratically controlled state. Memphis is a big Democratic city, though, same as Chicago, same as Portland, same as LA. I think he's targeting specific places that he thinks he can do a show of force. Maybe I'm not even sure if it's messaging towards the Democrats, because the Democrats just don't have the strength to oppose him anymore. They've kind of lost a lot of their authority, a lot of their power. They're splintering among themselves. They're shedding, especially younger voters, left and right. People just don't want to be associated with them. So, like, the Republicans kind of run the whole show right now. And I think he's more doing this to play up to his own base, that he is this tough guy, that he's gonna own the libs, as it were.
A little bit more tactical in that. I mean, Memphis is the last I checked, it was the most violent city in America. DC is the capital. Of course, it's going to be blue cities. I mean, that's the one where the crime rate's out of control. I mean, and for what it's worth, in Shreveport's out of hand, and that's where I'm from. And when we lived in Shreveport, we had Democrats and Republicans alike who actually were asking if we could get National Guard to come in. So, I mean, I'm with you, Chris. I don't like the idea of it at all. I think it sets a very bad precedent. But at the same time, this is kind of like one of those situations where the kids have been acting up and being hoodlums for so long. It's like you've got to get it back under control. And, the direction things are going right now with the mass shootings and these kind of domestic terror attacks, the police, the local law enforcement is going to get easily overwhelmed. ICE, however you line up on the ICE, if you are morally against it or, however you want to look at that, ICE is being hindered from doing their job. And I think that's very concerning when there is a precedent set that the general populace can stand up against law enforcement just basically on a whim. I don't agree with seatbelt laws, but I haven't burnt down the local precinct because of that. And so what do you do when these people who are just essentially, like you, me, Carvel, I mean, just regular guys in the community, and they're at risk of being shot and targeted, infrastructure's being burned down? What do you do? I think the Summer of Love, as it was called, really set a bad precedent to where it's the American people, I think, expect an escalation in the response.
Matt, in your opinion, just asking out of curiosity,
Yeah, sure.
if we didn't send troops to Portland or any of these other cities, what do you think could be done to speedy up the process of making it a city of less crime?
Well, it's not just easy because there's so many things you can do. I know that people gave Giuliani a lot of crap over stop and frisk, but you actually did see a decrease there. So it's proactive to get more cops on the scene, have them on the street, policing more proactively in the community. But there's so many socioeconomic things that can be done. Broken windows policing works really well. Where there's areas of blight, there's just crime, and that's something that needs to be paid attention to. Getting people, you need programs to get businesses into these abandoned areas. When you don't have that, you don't have people using them for drug dens, you don't have the homeless and camping in them. You lift up the community, people start to come back, and the money flows in. That's the biggest thing. Crime really is a socioeconomic problem. If you have prosperity in an area, I mean, Arkansas is a great example. Everybody, there's a reason there's a stereotype of Arkansans, right? Because, the barefoot hillbilly running around in the trailer house, that is southern Arkansas. But I live in Northwest, and because we have the Walmart money, J.B. Hunt, Tyson, things like that, we have park systems, we have great school systems, we have better roads, we have better infrastructure. And now I don't think anything about going out at night, riding my bike on the bike trails. I can do that in the middle of the night, and I'm not scared. In Shreveport, you couldn't do that.
Matt, I'd like to interject a bit on you're talking about stop and frisk. During my research into the decline of the violent crime rate over the years, one of the things that the people doing the studies found was that more intense incarcerations, more strict law enforcement didn't tend to correlate with lowered crime rates. All it did was make more criminals. What did, though, and you touched on that at the end, was increased economic opportunity was a big one. More of this community rejuvenation would definitely cut down a lot on violent crime. They also on a side, another one of the things was just the general aging population. Violent crime tends to be a young person's game for the most part. Right. So as the population has aged, you're going to see less violent crime in general. But that means that cities that have larger immigrant populations, because immigrants tend to come in younger, have younger families, they're going to have higher crime rates. So that's why you see places that are right there on the border, like LA, they're going to have a higher crime rate. The big cities that you have a lot of young families going to, like Atlanta, you're going to see increased crime rates there.
There's a lot of truth to that, actually, because the studies do come out and say that most people, I don't know if I was mentioning this to you guys before, but most people who create crime, I believe it's something around 40% of the people between age 18 and 24 are the ones who commit the most crime. And that is a big issue, right? So 40%, and we know that with education is also really important, and younger people tend to not be as educated. And 80% of crime that is committed in the U.S. is by people that do not have some sort of college, right? And it's 50% of people who commit crimes, they don't have, or are in prison, they do not have a high school diploma. And that is a really big issue, and that is something that young people are going to have even more of the issue. And this is why I kind of hate the attack on education that we've seen in more recent times, where education is not necessary, education this, education that. Yes, education does foster some types of groups that we'd rather not have in our country, but also at the same time, there is an importance to education and how we can keep our young folks educated. And we see this time and time and time again. If you think about it, if you're 23 years old and the most you can make is $12 an hour, you got to make ends meet, and you can't afford, and you're living in South Central LA. You either have a choice of being homeless, or you have a choice of, hey, let me just steal this thing from Beverly Hills, and that's gonna set me up for a long period of time. And yes, I think both of you guys are right. There needs to be more younger people need to have more access to better economics, and also too, they need to be more educated. Education is extremely important to me. That's one thing I complain a lot about in the Black community, is that we have to try to educate our young ones as much as possible. That is the only way that we can get ahead. And if we don't do that, there are going to be issues in the future.
Right, and even, I don't know necessarily that education, just flat out, just having a degree to have a degree is the answer. So we need.
That's not education. That's right. Getting a piece of paper.
We need to have meaningful education first of all. So and that's part of the problem is you come out of high school and you may know a base level foreign language, you can like order a cup of coffee, I guess, and then you've learned the quadratic equation, you took theater, you have no skills, you don't know how the real world works, you don't know how to manage your money, and that's something they need to we need to overhaul. I'm thinking probably starting in middle school to start providing pathways into trades, into actual skills that develop. I mean, foreign language is great. I mean, I've taken foreign language, not knocking that, but it's not useful in America to have somebody come out with two semesters of it.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, if we're talking about economic prosperity, that is different, right? And I'm not just talking about economic prosperity. I'm not talking about how much money we can make, how well we can financially be successful, right? Because you don't have to go to a university to become financially successful. You don't. You can go to a trade school. You can open up your own business, be successful. We know that, right? But education, it's said that the mind doesn't develop fully until you're like around 25 years old.
Right.
We know that. So when you have an undeveloped human being that has absolutely nothing going on for themselves, and they haven't been taught how to learn. That's important. How to learn. You got to learn how to learn.
100%.
Then they'll go with their animalistic instincts at times. Sometimes it will work for you, especially if you're like a fighter or you just like to work with your hands, you like to put things up. But other times, some people are naturally they're lazy sometimes, and some people are naturally don't know how to learn things or don't want to try anything new. And that becomes an issue in our society when we have a lot of people like this. And so when we try to combat this issue, and when I say education, uneducated minors or uneducated young youth, right? And we take ICE and say, hey, control that youth. I think that we actually identified the problem, but the solution is not correct.
That's a cultural thing that has to be corrected. I mean, parents that read, parents that do encourage studying and sit down with their kids, work on their homework. I know it's hard. I completely get that. But that's, like you're saying, Carville, that's perfect. You have to learn how to learn. And setting a kid in front of an iPad, letting him get on the PlayStation, that kid's not going to be primed to absorb information. He's not going to get those perspectives that he would get from reading books and being in the library. So that's just something I wanted to point out.
These are great ideas to keep the youth from, entering this criminal path, to lower that violent crime situation. But regardless of that, even if the crime is there, the reason that the federal troops are being sent is to support ICE's operations, which is completely unrelated to the violent crime. So even Trump's justification that he's using, that these are violent cities, so we need to send the military in there, is completely without merit. ICE's operations there are to collect and process and deport illegal immigrants. Those that have overstayed their visas, those that do not have authorization to enter the United States and are here anyway. This administration has made the point that they want to enforce border security, and they were voted into power based on that. So their mandate that they have to do this, it does exist in some form. That is what most Americans wanted that voted. So here we are.
ICE isn't soldiers, though. They're not.
Yeah.
ICE is not equipped. They're not, to my knowledge, not trained for combat. And now they're being sniped at. You've got people who are holding up the detention centers and attacking them. What do? I mean, do you waste the resources of local law enforcement to protect them at that point?
ICE is law enforcement, right? They're not just administrative people. They are law enforcement. They carry, they enforce customs and immigration.
But it's the same situation like with your local police force. If there is an active sniper heavily armed, you usually call in SWAT, which is a special team. And so ICE, like you're saying, Chris, they're at the end of the day, they're mainly there just to process and get people out of the country to facilitate that movement. And I understand they're armed and they have some kind of security training, but I mean, this is a whole new ballgame that they're playing with now.
We have had one attack on an ICE facility, and that was not in Portland, Oregon. That was not in Memphis. That was not in LA. And there is no organized effort for this, right? It seems like this individual isn't part of some national Antifa organization that's this big boogeyman that's going to cause all sorts of terrorism in the U.S. I don't think there's enough evidence to support that assertion.
Again, it is, it sets precedent because before nobody even knew who ICE was. And now you've got people, you can go look at the videos. They're blocking entry into the facilities. They're protesting. There's people calling for them to be shot in the street. Now, if that's not, that's just a ticking time bomb. So I'm with you, Chris. I don't like the idea of using the National Guard, but this is what's always been is weird to me. So my family was Democrats growing up, and I've said this on here before. They said a businessman should be president. Democrats got the businessman for president. Didn't like it. Not my family so much, but the general consensus among Democrats growing up was big pharma is evil. Now they want to get every booster that they come out with. And thirdly, I always heard Democrats say troops need to come home, we need to bring them home from overseas, and we need to have the troops work and secure America and be back home. Now you're seeing that the National Guard is defending the nation, and they're mad about that. And it's just very confusing messaging to me.
Do you see this as defending the nation, them going to these cities?
Yes. Doesn't mean that I have to think it's a good idea or morally right, but I think so. We got a domestic problem right now.
The goal in the Trump administration was to counter everything that's been done in the Biden administration when it comes to immigration, right? Do you think Trump has been successful in his tactics of minimizing? Because we know that there is success in kind of when it comes to immigration, right? And less people coming through the borders. But do you agree with his tactics, or do you think there were other ways, better solutions?
Yeah, there's no other way. You're going to have to forcefully remove people, but I would like to point out that as far as who ICE has deported, I think ICE has only deported 135,000 people. We've had, since Trump took office, I do believe, it's been 2 million people that have left that were not supposed to be in the country, and 1.6 of those were people who self-deported themselves. So to paint ICE as this just terrible boogeyman that's just tearing apart communities, and I get it. I understand. I work in construction. I work with these people, but it's not working out the way it's going. This is not good for anybody. Working in construction, I've seen crews who are working in the middle of the week, and they're illegal, and they have 12-year-old kids running the drywall crew. You can't do that, but they're undocumented. Nobody knows what's going on, so that kid's basically speaking English, playing translator. You see a credible drain on the education system. My wife has to deal with this. They've got so many non-English speaking students that they can't focus on teaching the actual, the English speaking students, because they're having to try to relate to these kids who can't even communicate. And that's what's concerning to me is there's these kids that are slipping through the cracks, that are being abused. There's drugs coming in through that southern border. There's sex trafficking coming through the southern border. I understand the Christian perspective of we want to help our neighbors and we want to extend that friendly helping hand to the alien, but at the same time, there's people who are being seriously harmed by this. And so to me, it's just a matter of, how do we mitigate that harm?
Yeah, that's a really interesting take, because me living in Michigan, we have a huge community of Mexicans. We have a huge community of Arabs, a diverse community in Metro Detroit. However, some of our issues are not the same as those in the South and closer to the southern border. Of course, there's a lot of people here in Michigan even that don't speak English, but that is usually never an issue when it comes to schooling. Everyone especially the kids. They all usually speak English now. I haven't spoken to any teacher that's ever taught in Dearborn, where we have a huge Muslim population. And I'm quite sure there's a lot of people that don't speak English there, or in Hamtramck. But that is an issue where we don't get a chance to see here in Michigan compared to what you might see in, the southern states. How about you, Chris? Do you have a take on the tactics that Trump has been using in order to keep our borders safe and keep people from coming in?
I think we're trying to hammer in screws. I think this is the wrong tool to use for the job. I think that the use of National Guard just emboldens the opposition to raise their own stakes. You go to a fight and you bring a knife, they're going to bring a gun, and it's just going to keep escalating that way. And I'm not unconvinced that the government doesn't want this escalation as a pretext to infringe upon more and more of our constitutional rights.
Well, that's always true of anything the government does.
That's why I want to cut this off at the head. Like, this is unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable to bring in federal troops for these sorts of issues. This is a local law enforcement issue. Portland has officers they can bring in to watch over these facilities. ICE has the personnel around the country. They can go in and police their own facilities. We do not need the National Guard. Recently in Nepal, a mob got together and, burned down the president's mansion. We're not seeing these big mobs of people causing havoc. We're not even seeing riots like when George Floyd happened. These are lone individuals that could be taken care of with perimeter security. I just don't see why we need this show of force. This is the sorts of thing that happens in authoritarian regimes. I would like us to not turn into that.
I think it's just, honestly, it's being proactive. Yes, it is an excessive show of force, but at the same time, we're seeing a rapid escalation of what they're willing to do. And the left, it's
got to be proportional, though, Matt. You have to return it with proportionality. Heightened security for one lone person. Again, we're not seeing a mob storming the ICE facility.
Not a mob, but we are seeing large groups gather.
Well, with their constitutional rights of protest, they're allowed to do that in a public area. If they don't want them there, they just have to extend the security perimeter. Like they do at DC all the time when there's a big political event. We want to create space because we know this is a hostile situation. You've set the boundaries, they're still allowed to protest.
No, I'm not saying they can't protest, but we're seeing them start to interfere with vehicles and actually go inside these facilities is the issue.
Just restrict access. You need to have badge.
We've seen that mayor get arrested.
But they're even being criticized now by the left for that. There's the one woman she basically was pushed inside of the gate by the van because she wouldn't move out in front of the van, and they popped.
I saw that video.
Balls. And it's like.
Crocodile tears and the world's smallest violin are ready for her. You Fafo, right?
Well, yeah. And it's the left is so disingenuous. The left's idea of immigration and everything is just bullshit, anyways. Because you can't simultaneously believe that we should have open borders and then at the same time be pissed off about colonialism.
This is what I want to know. 9/11 occurs. And all of a sudden we pass, the Patriot Act, all these new executive orders start coming on. We ramp up national security. Did the threat of Islamic terrorism justify the rise of authoritarian means in the U.S.? Because we've had 20 years now to reflect on that situation.
I would say absolutely. In that case, no, because it was up until that point, it was an isolated event. I mean, you had.
It wasn't though. The World Trade Centers were bombed in 1993 by Osama bin Laden. We had the USS Cole incident, which occurred off the coast of Yemen just a few months prior to that. I believe there was an embassy in Kenya that was bombed prior to that.
Yep.
So Islamic terrorism against the U.S. had been happening for a decade prior to that in a low-level situation. Nothing to that scale quite yet, but it had been happening. We just decided to rise up the authoritarian level, the protectionist level, because we valued security over freedom in that situation. Are these leftist terrorist incidents justified to rise up the right-wing authoritarianism in this country?
Well, let's think about it this way. What did the Patriot Act, all of these, increased security measures post 9/11, what did it really accomplish? I mean, it made it harder to damn fly, I guess.
Yeah.
It didn't really stop anything. This was more shit that was targeted at, the people directly, the domestic, populace. But at least now this is something that is. The Trump using the National Guard is more of a proactive, hands-on approach.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think it's more. I think it's more of that same security theater that occurred after 9/11. I think that this is the face of what's going to be shown to people to get people to accept all of the nasty stuff that's right behind that face that we aren't seeing. And I'm worried about the ramifications of that, just like I'm still worried to this day about all the bad things that have happened, all the restrictions of freedom that have happened in the light of the Patriot Act. And I just think we are gearing up for a new version of that is even more restrictive on individuals. And you can just look at what the Heritage Foundation has been saying in regards to this sort of stuff, where they're the ones that came up with Project 2025, the thing that Trump has no knowledge about, yet somehow every single damn thing he's done has followed the script of Project 2025. The people that wrote that, they have pitched the idea of using federal troops to cut down on leftist insurrections. All of that is just terrifying to me. And I don't want anything that could even potentially be close to that in this country right now.
Well, I mean, we were complaining a lot about, before Trump took office, we were complaining a lot about illegal immigrants. We were seeing the borders, people were coming in like crazy from the borders. This was something that we were asking for. We were saying, hey, we need to bring it into that, And the thing about it is, in 2016, when Trump initially ran, and his stance was the border, we thought he was crazy and unreasonable because the Obama administration had done a pretty good job at deporting a lot of illegals. Now, when we see the Biden administration and a lot of illegals coming in, then we recognize, well, actually, hey, Trump made a lot of sense. So his tactics right now, I don't necessarily agree with. I don't think that taking control of cities is the right path. And yes, I know that he said he's protecting the federal buildings and ICE and all that, but it seems to me more that he's got a vendetta. And he's trying to get back with everybody that has done him wrong, people or cities or whatever it may be. So I'm not in completely disagreement with him deporting a lot of illegals. Some of them have good stories. Some of them, yes, I know, but it's helped me out a little bit. And the way it's helped me out is that a lot of So for those who don't know, I'm in the tech field. A lot of Americans that are getting passed up for cheaper labor and actually better knowledge, because there's a lot of foreigners that know a lot more, especially through experiences, that know a lot more than Americans, and they're willing to work 80 hours, or 90 hours a week, whatever it may be. And, in the US we have laws. So when Trump attacks the H-1B visa, that actually helps out a lot of Americans. In some ways, but there's always, companies always find a way around that.
Well, Carvel, do you know, we talked earlier about, economic accessibility for people. And when Biden, in his job growth, it was estimated like 90% of Biden's job growth, the jobs went to immigrants and migrants, and it was like 50 or 60% of those jobs were taken by illegal immigrants. So to your point on,
I don't know. I don't know much of that statistics. I wouldn't doubt it, but I mean, but one thing I did like about Biden is that he was helping out a lot of people. Even if it wasn't helping out me, he was helping out a lot of people. Like, one thing I really loved was the child tax credit that a lot of people got. I didn't get it, and I was upset I didn't get it, but at the same time, I'm actually rooting for a lot of us Americans, and especially, my sisters, they have a combination of 10 nieces and nephews, so a lot of people in my family benefited. But also at the same time, there were a lot of things that were going on, as I mentioned, a lot of foreigners coming in easily, that kind of hurt me. But it did help me too. So it's one of those things that it's like, it depends on what side of the fence you're going to be standing on, if you're going to get shit on or not, if you're going to get shit thrown on you, what side of the fan, where the fan is blowing. So I take one of those stance as like, this is what the people wanted, and this is what the people got. I don't necessarily agree 100% with how it's being done, but it could be either really beneficial to you or it could hurt you.
Well, I don't think any
really
of us
bad.
100% agree with how it's being done.
Right.
I don't think anybody
Almost
does.
zero.
That's completely fair, and it sucks, and it's painful, and I blame the damn politicians of the past that set this kind of shitstorm up, because people say these people are in our neighborhoods, they become friends, and they have. I mean, I've had tons of Hispanic friends, and we do have this really rich multicultural. Even here, Arkansas, we've got where I live is a smaller town, and we have African immigrants. We have the Marshallese, a very big concentration of them. We have Indians and Middle Eastern people, and it does suck. But at the same time, the job market, as far as the illegal aspect of that goes, is in shambles, and we don't have the economic opportunity we should have. And these people themselves are being exploited by these companies, and that's not fair. I mean, we've basically, the Democrats did this beautiful thing. I don't know how they orchestrated this, because this is genius, but they're like, let's do slavery, but make it okay. And that's essentially what they've done with illegal immigrants.
Well, I disagree with that a little bit. And the reason why I disagree with that is because, number one, illegals kind of do want this. And the reason why they want this is because they understand one thing, right? You can do better off here than you can in your home country. We saw what happened to China in the 90s. Everybody was complaining about the labor and how we were making slave laborers with them making t-shirts and everything. Now you look at China right now, they're the second biggest economy in the world, and they hide their money better than Americans.
But you're not seeing that in any other country, though, is the issue. I mean, there's a talent drain coming from
that's exactly my point, right? Where these slave laborers, that's the same thing as happened in India, the same thing happened in China, where the opportunity came. And once the opportunity came, the economy flourished. And that's the same thing, because I can tell you in Detroit or a lot of other cities, right, where a lot of foreigners are willing to work for cheaper labor or for cheaper whatever, but they're used to having like 10 people inside one home. You bring all that money, that economy together, guess what? You got a restaurant open, you got a store open, your corner store, your gas station. And a lot of them are running Detroit right now, you'll see, because they've had that mindset of, hey, I can save, I can make do, and it's a different mindset that most Americans have.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, they start off with less money, but in the end, they're the ones that are driving the Maseratis and.
But you're saying legal though is the thing.
Not always legal.
Well, but see, here's the thing. So legal is a different story. Illegal, they say that adds to the country. It's about 65 to 70,000 and a person that we lose economically each year for illegal people in the country. So it's not a net benefit to us, unless you're like Kelly Osbourne and you've got some Mexican lady to clean your toilet.
I mean, you're right. I mean, but it also too depends on the job, right? Let's say that you got your business, right? And I don't know much about your business, but let's say that America, you need to pay people $15 an hour. Mm-hmm. But nobody's gonna work for $15 an hour that is American. But you find, someone of, let's say a Mexican or so sorry viewers, I'm not trying to point a particular group out, but let's say Mexicans are willing to work for half of that, $8. Of course, what are you gonna do? You're gonna hire 2 Mexicans, and get your job done and get your work done. They are willing to do that, that's a failure
of the U.S. government not enforcing the laws and taking a very laissez-faire attitude towards businesses and not correctly punishing businesses that violate our laws. A company that continuously hires illegal labor should be forced to lose all of its business licenses. They should get the death penalty. Because
the death penalty! Oh my goodness!
If a business, I do not believe a business can be a person until the state of Texas executes them. All right, but for real though, that is the reason why we have this situation that we have, where this illegal labor is more than happy to come in and undercut American labor, because the businesses want it, because the federal government wants it, because nobody is enforcing the laws that we pass.
Here's the thing: we're just talking about Matt's business. I'm not saying he has illegals or not, but we're talking about Matt's business.
Why would a person who's here legally want to undercut their labor? Because they want to make the $15-$20 an hour, same as me.
It's all about.
Well, he's got the opportunity. He's a citizen.
Yeah.
He's got the opportunity though. He's a citizen. He's here legally. He's got access to the programs that I have.
There actually are Hispanics that are supportive of ICE, unless they're abusing their fellow Hispanics who are here illegally. There are a lot of legal Hispanic business owners in the construction industry that fully support this because they're unable to compete. I'm unable to compete because I don't use those business practices. I mean, if I have another year like I did this year, I'm probably not going to continue this because I can't compete with the illegal labor that is, like Carvel's saying, charging $8 an hour compared to the minimum 15.
I mean, I'm not saying I disagree with, you at all, Chris, or Matt, if you're agreeing with Matt. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, the psychology of a lot of people, psychology of the person that wants to survive.
Oh, I don't blame them at all. I don't blame them at all. If Sweden, for instance, let me come in and I could make $20 an hour, whereas their people were making 30, and I get all the benefits of, the welfare benefits, the housing benefits, whatever, why the hell wouldn't I do that? Of course I would do that. But of course they would be pissed, the native Swedes would be pissed off at me taking advantage of their resources that weren't intended for me.
Well, I'll throw one out there for you that this is a real head scratcher. Liberals, tell me what you're going to do with this. So my son had a friend. His father was a Cuban American, so here legally he had to leave Florida and move because the illegal Hispanics, the Hondurans, the Mexicans, Salvadorans in Florida would not let him work because he was Cuban. That's illegal Hispanic in America who can't work because of other illegal Hispanics. Now, what are you going to do with that?
That is where the failure in the system is. Fixing that would do much more to help ICE get illegal immigrants off than sending the National Guard into Memphis, Tennessee. Killing the roofing companies that only hire illegal immigrants to do the job would do much more for this country than marching troops through Portland.
And I 100% agree, but you have to get them out because they're already breaking the law. It's not above them to break the law. And
well, if they can't work, they can't live here.
But they can work. They're paying them cash.
No, that's what I mean. If you punish the company, Republicans always use this a lot. You shut off the tap. Welfare people will have to get a job. If you shut off these business opportunities, because if I'm a business and I know that I could lose my business if I hire an illegal immigrant, and I can only pay the $15 an hour, $20 an hour, whatever it is. I'm going to hire the U.S. citizen over the immigrant, and the immigrant's not going to have a job, so they're not going to be able to afford food. They're not going to be able to afford housing. They're going to go back home. They're going to self-deport. That's what we want. What we want is a humane answer to this. We want to provide them a pathway to citizenship that is fair for everyone. For the people who are still waiting in Guatemala to be a citizen, for the people who, have married somebody and want to integrate and want to become a U.S. citizen, they got to get in the same line as everyone else.
Right, and that's the baseline of where I'm coming from. I don't think anybody, unless you are like on the most fringe of fringe, nobody is like anti-immigrant. I mean, this whole panel is probably here because of immigration. Yeah. I mean, we've got 3 different areas that are represented here throughout the world, and so nobody's got a problem with that. But that's where I come from, is the standpoint of I'm not so much worried about the immigrants being here. My problem is we're abusing the immigrants. I literally, and I know Carl disagrees with me, but I see this as modern day slavery. We imported a new slave class into America.
I'm not disagreeing with the fact that the labor is a bit slavery. I'm not completely disagreeing with that, but I'm more so looking and pointing at the idea of the perceived opportunity that these immigrants have. And yes, it is slave. Like I mentioned, we were complaining about in the 90s, the early 2000s, that China was doing a lot of slave labor. U.S. companies were, they had slaves over there. But we see where they are now. They're big, right? And it's all about the opportunities that presented themselves, because here in the U.S., they can make a lot more money than they could back at home. So would you go to, let's say some country in the Middle East was making tens of thousands more than the typical American. So would you go there in the Middle East and make half the money that the normal people there make, but like 10 times the amount that you would make in America?
That's the entire economy of Dubai.
Yeah. Well,
that's the entire economy of Qatar. Right. And Americans eat that up too. Go be a contractor out in Saudi Arabia, make a ton of money, and then come back to America.
And here's how I would not do it, because I don't like to impose on people, and I would know that especially at my age, going to another country, I'm not going to assimilate. I can't assimilate. I mean, I take a foreign language right now, and it's hard as hell for me to get it through. I'm never going to learn it. I'm probably never going to speak it fluently. Different food, different culture, different things, and that's how I I look at it is I wouldn't, if I was going to another country, it'd have to be one where at least they spoke English and had some kind of similar culture to what I have here in America. And that's a big problem that we're having now. I mean, we've had issues living here with things my wife has experienced with some immigrants, and these are things to them are acceptable in their country, but here they're not. And there was a contractor who was working on an apartment complex, and there was some of the subcontractors that were catcalling some clearly girls that were like 13, 15 years old. And the contractor was like, no, you can't do that. Those girls are underage. And they're like, it's okay where we're from to do this.
Right.
And so that's my thing is I wouldn't want to go to another country, especially if I'm going to be making half of what they are, and use up their welfare programs and not be able to assimilate and be a burden on their system. We experienced this yesterday. We went to a park, my family did, and there was a lady came up with her kid, and he starts rummaging through all my wife's stuff, and the problem is they're African. Now, she told me they're African. I don't know. I was like, if they spoke Swahili, I could probably have vaguely communicated with them, but I don't know what they spoke. But she was like, clearly didn't speak English, and she could not even communicate to make the kids stop clawing through her stuff. And that's an issue. I mean, you can't reasonably function in a society like that. And then I not only do you fear for your own safety, but you fear for that person's safety. I mean, think of the advantage that can be taken of somebody that doesn't speak English. I see it all the time in this industry.
Do you believe that America is a nation for Americans, or is America an economic hub that the entire world should have access to enrich themselves and make their lives better?
That's a good question.
Because how you answer depends on our policy that we should have towards these immigrants.
So I can't give a definite answer, either one of the two, because there's actually importance in the both, right? So this country is a country for Americans, but also at the same time, we have to emphasize the leadership and the educational backgrounds of foreigners that can help Americans move forward culturally, educationally, and economically. So there are a lot of foreigners that we know that has changed America in such a way that it allowed us to be at the position we are in. Like, think about, like, for an example, Albert Einstein, right? If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have created the atomic bomb. Not saying that that's, I know a lot of us have our thoughts about if that was good or bad, but if he didn't come here as a foreigner and we didn't allow him in, well, maybe the Germans would have created the atomic bomb before we would have, and maybe they would have just nuked Moscow. And we don't know these things, but there is a chance that could have happened. But so it's important to use knowledge from these foreigners that want to come here for better opportunities, but at the same time we have to get the best foreigners coming in, and the ones that have good intentions. And that's where I'm at, right? So I'm not against immigration. I actually welcome foreigners, but I want them to come in at the right space, right? And I don't want them to come in and just take all of the Americans' jobs, because the Americans that are here already, they do need opportunities. Otherwise, we're going to be living on the street, because we know that the guy in India who has 10 years of experience in software is 100 times smarter than an American college graduate that has absolutely no experience, and their Indians are so smart. They're fucking smart, excuse me. and they're really good at software, and they could take, and there's a billion of them, and they could take all of our jobs. They can't do that because they're that good. So that just means that Americans will have no opportunities. Like I was saying, like just a lot of foreigners, there's billions of foreigners, billions of Chinese, billions of Indians that are just so much better than Americans at software. And we get them in here and they have all the jobs. We have absolutely no opportunities for American graduate students. And that sucks.
So what you're saying is Indians, Chinese, these foreign nationals, they do not have a right to enter the U.S.
I'm not saying they don't have a right. They do. They have every right. But
do they? No. I believe that everyone around the world has the right to attempt to enter the U.S.
Yep.
Is that what you're agreeing to?
Yes, that is 100%.
But I do not believe everyone has a right to be in the U.S. because there are not enough resources in America to support the entire world as things stand.
You know, something that would really help is if we really need to do this as a country. We really need to define what it is to be an American. We've kind of went to the complete opposite end of the ship here because, you know, when America's in its infancy, we do have a lot of unfettered immigration. People are coming here, and that at that point, you know, the definition of American was kind of a waspy one. You had immigrants that were giving up their languages, their cultural traditions, their foods, things like that. You know, some immigrants wouldn't even teach their kids their native languages, and I don't like that. I hated that. I think that's awful. But fast forward to now, and we have immigrants that come in and do not want to learn English. They do not want to fit into any kind of social structure. They still do the same things that they were doing in their country of origin, which arguably is what led to the decline of their country of origin. They're flying their own flags. That doesn't work out either. And so I think that's, especially now we've run the multicultural experiment. We need to have some kind of agreed upon definition of what American means. And I think we need to get away from it being so race-based and it be a shared group of values.
Right. And here's the ugly side of kind of and the very negative side, in which I don't like what the Trump administration is doing, is that a lot of people who deserve the opportunity to come here are not even getting the opportunity. For an example, I have a friend whose wife is Canadian, and immigration is taking forever for her to come here, like 2 years, you know. And this is an issue because they have to cross borders for 2 and some years, you know, just to be together. Same thing happened to me, right? And where I was seeing someone, and there was a process that took over 2 years. And under the Biden administration, it took like 6 months. Under the Trump administration, it took like, I said 2 years, well, it was actually 2.5 to 3 years, and a lot of people got denied. And a lot of those people have the right to be in the country, but we're stopping everybody at every side, and that's where
It needs to be expedited for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
I think really the issue comes down to it's the same issue that's all throughout this country. We prioritize wrong. The things that we should be doing, we're not, and the things we shouldn't be doing, we are.
Right.
And that's all in service to some ulterior motive that is contrary to the benefit of all Americans. And that's kind of been the theme of this nation for the last few decades, it seems. And it's why we need that separate voice. You know, like the American Solidarity Party, for instance, a new voice, a separate voice that is completely divorced from all of that baggage that seems to be holding our country back. And
Oh yeah, it's definitely time for a fresh perspective on things, and a party that's not so entrenched, like you're saying, Chris. The ASP is not entrenched. We're not part of. George Carlin called it the Bacon Wrapped Shrimp Club. We don't really have a dog in the hunt. We just want what's best for everybody. So
what do you guys think would be the ASP answer to this situation? Taking into consideration, the whole platform, we've kind of given our opinions. What if there was to be a position, what do you think the party would go with on this?
I think, personally, man, I think that the party has a lot of talking things we got to talk out as far as where we are on the same page, especially when it comes to this. But if I could guess where the party was in this situation, I would assume that, kind of my understanding, not saying that I speak for the party, but collectively, I would think that the party would agree with kind of what I said, as far as we see the need to protect our border. When we see the need and we know that there is an issue, but at the same time, we want to allow foreigners to have the opportunity to still be an American, and those opportunities should not be too difficult, but difficult to the ones that are, creating crime or not here for the right reasons. And kind of what you were pointing to earlier, Chris, how we are prioritizing the wrong things and not prioritizing the right things.
And on the usage of the National Guard, Carvel, where do you think the party would sit with that, with Trump's actions?
I think the party would be against it. I think the use of the National Guard, I think the party would be against it. As in the tactics, we don't like it. I'm against it. I don't like it, but at the same time, I understand the idea, but I'm against of how everything's being implemented.
Well, wave your magic wand. I think Carvel has used that before. Wave your magic wand. The ASP's in charge of everything. It can do whatever it wants.
Okay.
You're going to have a very lean and a very efficient immigration system. I think you will have border security, but you'll have something that makes a lot more sense and is a lot more humane than what you had right now. ASP is Christian democratic, and we're going to adhere to what the Bible has instructed us on how to treat people. So that's not to say it would just be lawlessness and open borders, but it probably would be a lot more permeable than what most conservatives right would like, but not to the extreme that the left would want. And party overall, I think, would be against the National Guard being used in this way. I don't like it. I'm like you, Chris. I don't like it, but I'm not against it because, and I think most people in this party are going to think of this as like a present moment problem. I'm blaming the bastards that did this to start with, that caused this problem. And I see it as like spring cleaning. You don't go into your tool shed and like start taking out random things. I need this, I'll leave this, I'll put this here. When you spring clean, you have to take out all that shit, and then you put back in exactly what you need, what's useful, and everything else falls by the wayside. And that's where we're at, is we have a system that's so bogged down, so messed up. At this point, it's going to take a drastic measure like just complete mass deportations, and then let's figure this out so the people like Carvel, like you're saying, the people that need to be here, that deserve to be here, that are better for America are here.
I think that the position that the party would have on this is, obviously they would condemn the taking of any life, especially in an act of terrorism that is totally unacceptable to even. It's totally disproportionate in a just. Even if you feel like you're in a just war situation, it is completely disproportionate, inappropriate, wrong, morally reprehensible. They would condemn that 100%. I think they would also condemn the dehumanization of peoples, the processing of illegal immigrants, the way that the government's been doing it has been completely wrong. It has removed a lot of the humanity from individuals housed in the ICE facility, especially. And they would, like I agree, they would see the use of the National Guard in this as a disproportionate use of force, likely opposition to the Constitution, violation of people's rights, all that. I think that's where the party would stand on all of these issues, just based on, what I've come to understand the party's position is. And, I think that's a good position to have. I think that's something that would move the nation forward, because we're always thinking of our neighbor and thinking of our family and recognizing that there's no reason they can't be one and the same. And we should work towards that sort of thing.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to We Have Issue podcast. I am Carvel.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Chris.
Thank you for attending. Have a good day.